I'll never
And
get
we're
to
live.
Wow.
We are live. Cool. Excellent. Hey, guys. It's Craig or Al Mozzie, stop biting, Crafty from Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit and Craftworks Distillery. And I'm in my shed. There we are. In my shed, broadcasting from the shed. And so this is, Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit. So for those who don't know, it's a couple of guys, Luke, Todd, and myself, and we basically just shoot the shit, have conversations with people in the industry in Australia. Luke's laughing, so something's happened, and internationals as well. So tonight we are returning to Tasmania. We haven't been to Tasmania for a little bit, so and tonight we're returning to the cooperage. So we had YN Oak, Andrew Young on, I don't know, last year sometime. And tonight we have Transwood Cooperage, Laurie and Dave. Guys, how are you?
Going great, mate. Going great.
Excellent. Good. That's good to hear. And it's a clear reception and we're all here. So that's good. All right. So let's kick it off. Let's rip into it. But the first thing we always do is say, well, what are we going to be drinking tonight? And the idea is to drink something which is Australian. So I'll kick it off first because I got something pretty cool. So first thing is my beer, a Barellan beer, which I got from a Voyager Craft Malt, Stu Wycross, and he gave me a case of this, and it's a damn fine beer. Then I'm moving on to, it's ginger beer cask night. Sorry, Todd. I know we split this, but I'm drinking it tonight.
That's all right.
This is the ginger beer cask from Starwood down in Melbourne. And then this is the ginger beer cask from, if you can see it,
Hobart.
From Hobart. So ginger beer to ginger beer tonight. So that's what I'm drinking. Laurie, Dave, what are you drinking?
I've got a Kalara tonight, musket cask.
Oh, very
made
nice.
By Christy Booth Lark makes hot whiskey. That's what I'm starting off with. I don't know what you got there, Loz.
I've got a trusty Cooper's MIDI and a glass of the
Oops.
Oh no, we've lost them already.
What happened there?
We've been doing so well. We've had the last half hour.
You're
You're back.
No, we don't know
So
what
we
you're drinking.
never know what they were drinking. It's a secret.
It's that Cooper's beer, what, done it?
It was, absolutely, yeah.
What was the whiskey you're going to drink?
Hillwood Chardonnay cask.
Right, you dropped
Very
out
nice.
for a split second. We didn't hear it. So okay, so
Yep.
the Hillwood Chardonnay cask, excellent. That'd be cool. All right, Todd, my right hand man, mate. What are you drinking?
Well, it comes across. So, first one is a new distillery that I discovered at the markets over the weekend. So it's called Moonshiner Pomegranate Gin.
Wow.
It's rather interesting, quite spicy.
I picked up one of those from the market as well.
Yeah. So they had some pretty interesting stuff.
Mm.
Developed over as a result of being locked down in COVID. So they thought, what the heck am we going to do? Let's make gin. And then I'm moving over to my trusty
Yeah,
Black
lovely.
Snake. So
How do you say that, Todd? How do you say it?
Reposato.
Reposado.
Well done.
Reposado. So the reason why I said that
Sorry, Rosemary.
is because Rosemary from Black Snake Distillery, she's a friend of the shed, and they're in Narrabri, and they make agave spirit. And I have trouble saying reposado, so she put it on a text.
Yeah, sorry, Rosemary.
So every time I get close to it, she gives me shit about it. Reposado. So I can't say it. Anyway,
We just sent a 50-litre cask up to them this week.
yeah,
So
of course
hopefully-
you know them. Yeah. I forgot. Of course you do. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, and Luke, IT extraordinaire and everything else. What are we doing? You on?
So I've got.
Ooh.
The light's a bit dodgy there. Hold on, let me.
Shiny.
I have the OCD. It's a pretty bottle. The OCD Barrel 7. I don't. It's his whiskey. The OCD
Okay,
whiskey. The latest
so
release.
Basically, Ed got lazy and didn't put it on.
And didn't even put a fucking name on it. On you, Ed. So yeah, I'm on that one because I missed out on his first release, so I snapped up a second. And then I'm going to move on to a black snake.
You can say it, not me.
Well, I've got the Hoven.
Oh,
It's not
Hoven.
Joven, it's Hoven.
So the Joven,
right, Rosemary?
is it the Joven? Is it Joven?
Hoven.
Rosemary, can you type? Can you send it phonetically, please? Because Luke needs some help there.
I got it. So yeah, I'll be on that.
Yeah, right. Cool. All right. So let's rip into it. All right. So
Silent J. Oven. She says Silent J.
Thank you, Rosemary. Okay. So what I want to kick it off is with there's a lot of talk in the industry about shortage of wood. And some of it's been driven by COVID, some of it's been driven by shortages, general shortages, some of it's been driven by issues with freighting and et cetera, et cetera. So Dave and Laurie, can you just kick it off from, you're right at the coalface with wood and sourcing wood. What, from your standpoint, what are you seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing massive changes over the last 6 months in getting good timber. Bourbon casks, for one, have taken forever to get here once you order. I think the last shipment of bourbon we ordered took 6 months to get here, where it normally takes 6 to 7 weeks. They've gone up in price. My latest price I just got through, they're gone up about $40 US per barrel, or Australian per barrel. Freight's gone up from the last lot I got cost us about $13,000 for freight to Tassie. We're now looking at minimum $20,000, could be more. So all in all, bourbon prices are going to go up by $90 to $100 per barrel.
Yeah, right.
Fortified wines, getting very difficult to get. Getting good quality fortified wines is becoming very difficult. So much pressure being put on now by the larger organisations, the Archie Roses, the Starwoods. With their volumes they're producing, they're all looking for really good quality barrels. So obviously the demand is so great, it's just pushing the prices up, and there's only a certain amount of them to go around, unfortunately. We're fairly fortunate because we're a small organisation. There's only myself and my son Laurie, and my daughter and my wife and my daughter-in-law. We sort of work in the workshop together, so we don't require a real big volume. Yeah. But the prices are getting pretty heavy. I was quoted today about $750 for some nice, I think they're about 70-year-old port casks, but they're going to cost me about $750 each. Plus I've got to get them freighted in here. So what we were selling a port cask for, like a quarter cask or 125 litre, we were selling around about the $900 mark 6 months ago. We're going to be looking at probably $1,300 to $1,400.
Yeah.
And we won't touch anything unless it's good quality. We're not going to deal with any rubbish.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff out there that's been seasoned for a couple of years. Not interested in it. We want quality stuff.
Yeah,
we realise how much effort you guys put so much effort in, or the guys put so much effort into making a really good spirit. A lot of dollars goes into it. We want to make sure after the 4 or 5 years that it's sitting in the cask, what they get out is better than what they put in there.
How does that? So with that sort of a price increase, so this is probably more Crafty than you guys, but with that sort of a price increase on the barrel itself, when and how much does that influence the bottle price? Will we see an increase in bottle price in 4 or 5 years' time, 10 years' time, or do you think that'll pass on sooner?
It's a big unknown, really. It's. I mean, I remember. Oh God, not that long ago, Tim Duckett was talking about pricing of barrels, right? And Tim Duckett, a few years ago, said he was barrel banking, which basically means he was buying barrels when he found good barrels and putting them away and utilizing them when he needed to. And we started to do it a little bit on a much, much smaller scale. But I remember Tim saying he can see the day where barrels will be fortifieds will be 2,000 for a barrel. And you go, wow, what does that actually do? For the small guys like myself, it's like, okay, you've got a barrel. It's a very special barrel, or 2 barrels or 3 barrels. But when you're the big operations, and you mentioned the Archie Roses and the Starwoods and all that, that's a lot of dollars you're forking out for wood, isn't it?
Mm. It's got to affect the price at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. To what point and when, who knows? But it pushes the. And I'd be interested to see what you think about this, Laurie and Dave. So in Australia, it's you got wine wood, right? And you got the likes of Starwood that use a lot of wine wood, right? And a lot of times it's wet wood. So it's coming straight out of the wineries and bang, it's been filled. So if you're seeing a real push on bourbon, and you're seeing a real shortage of fortifieds, and it's going to get increasingly worse, do you think it's going to force more and more distillers to work with wine barrels and recoopered wine barrels, or just wine barrels straight out of wineries? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll go that way. It's going to have to. You've got to be pretty careful when you're selecting your wine barrels too. You want to make sure they're fresh, they're not sulfured.
Yeah,
they've got no VA in them. So there's a lot of little traps you've got to watch out for when you're purchasing wine barrels. You can get caught. But if they're shaved out and toasted and charred well, you're getting some pretty good results out of them. We tried some nice Pinots down here that are and Shardies. Laurie's on a Shardie at the moment. They're from Hillwood. Very nice, very nice whiskey. And I think what a lot of people may do going forward as well is do a lot of finishing, like the smaller guys might put down in a Pinot or a Shardie or a red wine of some sort for 4 or 5 years. Then they might be able to then afford to buy a larger format, maybe a 200 or a 300 litre ex-fortified of good quality.
Yep.
Place 2 or 3 of their small barrels into that, finish them off for 6 months or more, or whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And then reuse that fortified again a second time to get a second hit out of it. And just to add a bit of sweetness and a bit more character to those wines, to the whiskies that have been in the wine barrels. I can see that as being a possibility. And I also see a lot more second fills coming our way as well. We're doing a lot of shave toast and rechars of 100 litres and huge minis and 50s for distilleries down here. So I think a lot of the small guys will go back into a lot more second fills.
Yep.
And if they're treated right, you get darn good results from them. Really good results.
Okay.
Sullivan's been for a while with their large formats, and they've got some pretty good whiskies in the second fills.
Now, you touched on something which I'd like you to explain in a bit more detail, if you wouldn't mind, because there's distillers out there young distillers who wouldn't necessarily understand this side of it. And I think it's really important. So you talked about VA and you talked about sulfur, and what does it mean from your standpoint when you're looking for barrels from winemakers? What are the traps? What are you looking for? And you mentioned sulfur particularly. Just can you explain that to people out there?
Laurie, I'll give Laurie a chop at this one. He's the nose man in our business.
And go, Laurie, now.
Yes. So with the sulfur, especially if they've been sitting around, they've got like a sulfur citric acid solution sitting in them. You get some pretty terrible notes coming off there. You can get them steamed out by the winery before you purchase them, and cleans them up quite a bit. In terms of your VA, if they've been transported without a bung in them, or you you get the wrong bacteria in there and you start the acidic fermentation, then you're gonna get that vinegar smell, and even a hint of that can cause some pretty big dramas from reports that we've heard from different distillers who've had that in their cask. So every cask we're getting in, pretty much nosing it, really trying to make sure any sort of hint of that sulfur or vinegar or something like that, you want to just put it aside and sell it for a planter pot, basically, because it's not really worth the risk getting those notes in there. So you want to really just make sure that you're checking that everything's fresh, working in with a winery that, A, has good quality wine, because we see that makes a massive difference as well. You get some of the barrels in where you can have 2 Pinot casks, one from a boutique winery that, really looks after their wine barrels and, doesn't sulfur and all of that sort of thing. And then you can get sort of a more mass-produced cask. When you're toasting them on the fire, they're absolute chalk and cheese. So that selection of casks with wine barrels, I think, is pretty critical when it comes to that.
And they're not salvageable if they have that slight vinegar or whatever. You can't
shave it out and toast and rechar and get
make
through
it a heavy char.
It's there.
If they've got VA in it, you just burn them. They're no good.
Yeah, we try to stay away from it. Just we don't want to take the risk. I wouldn't say that you couldn't do it, but I wouldn't want to put 100 litres of your guys' spirit on the line with it, sort of thing, for the sake of a wine cask.
With the sulfur, you can generally, if you're working well with the winery, the winery will barrel wash them with steam or hot water, and that will generally get rid of most of the sulfur out of it. But if it's been in there a long time and it's gone a little bit rank, you won't get rid of it. It's if they've maintained the sulfur, if it's been looked after, the barrel's been looked after, you can generally get rid of it. But the VA, I just don't like it at all.
I guess that represents a pretty big risk for you, doesn't it, in getting all these barrels, that there's the possibility that there's a couple of bodgy ones in the batch, and if you're having to buy them for that much money, wow.
Well, talking about barrel banking, one of the guys down here, one of the older distilleries down here, I was talking to the other week, and he had he bought some nice fortifiers and had them banked up in South Australia, and he had them he got 8 turned into 100s for him and sent down, and 5 of them were VA. So he rang me up and said, "What can we do with them, Dave?" And I just said, "Mate, no good, get rid of them." So it's a lot of money, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort. So even if you're banking them, you've got to be really careful how you store it. You just don't buy them and stick them in the shed and forget about them.
How do you bank a barrel?
How do you maintain a barrel? Before you actually fill it.
If it's a wine barrel, or if it's even a fortified wine barrel, you always make sure the bung's in it all the time. So keep it sealed. And you keep it out the weather. Don't have them sitting out in the rain, getting water in them. And quite often we'll break them down. If we break them down, we dry them right out. Sometimes we'll pressure wash them to get rid of any residue off them, and then we'll strip them out, dry them out, and you just got to keep an eye on it. And we don't try and bank too much stock. We try and keep a reasonable amount ahead of us, but we don't try and have massive amounts in front of us. Because if you leave moisture in them, they'll go mouldy, and the mould's another issue. You get that mould in there, you'll throw a whole new dimension of horribleness into your whiskey. So your timbers are you've really got to look after it. It's a very valuable resource, very hard to come by, and you've really got to nurture it.
Yeah, right. So with
I've got a question. Hang on, Luke. I just want to get this one quickly while it's fresh in my head. So I've got old wood PX sherry casks out of Spain, right? And whenever they've arrived, they've always had a couple of litres of sherry in them. And when you pop the bungs, they smell beautiful. And they, to date, I've not had a leaker. I've not had any issues with off flavours and that. So they are wet, but they're wet with fortified. They're not wet with water. So in your opinion, your experience, that's the way. If you're going to bring barrels in like that, that's the way you want to bring in some residual, whatever the original liquid is, fortified in the barrel, don't you?
Yeah, I'd say so. And then make sure that when you do get them, if you take the bung out to have a nose for it, that you put the bung in and seal it back off nice and tight. You don't want to get that air in there that's going to create any oxidization or any. That's when you start to run into problems. So make sure they're sealed, kept sealed all the time. And don't go over buying. That's the biggest problem I see most distillers do. And they'll buy big volumes so that they don't, they might buy them a bit cheaper, or they're looking ahead. But you don't want barrels laying around with a little bit of moisture in them for a long period of time, because they're going to dry out. You're going to have issues with them. So we always encourage them as just to buy. We'd sooner supply you with 2 barrels a week rather than supply you with 20 barrels that's going to last you 10 weeks.
Yeah. It's the freshness of the wood. I've had experience with imported barrels, like what I said about those sherry barrels, and a lot of them, the bunghole stave cracks after a period of time. It's not in the direction of the grain. It's against it, and across it, and they all do it. Why?
Just a weak point of your barrel. Your bung stave's your weak point, because you're cutting most of your stave, your timber away. A lot of pressure in timber, a hell of a lot of pressure when you swell them up. And if there's a weak point there, it'll find it out, and they'll just crack through your bung stave. Not much you can do about it. You're usually pretty fortunate if it's your bung stave, because you're not going to lose anything out of it. You don't want it at the bottom. You'll just drop all your contents.
No, it's true. Let's talk about you guys, eh? We sort of got quite into wood really quickly because we got a lot of questions. We did the same with Youngie, with Wye and Oak. You know, we hit them up with a lot of questions, and a lot of people want to know this bit of information. But who is Transwood? Where did they come from? And I know you started in Queensland, and you're in Tasmania. What's the story?
Okay, we moved down here 3 years ago next Thursday, since we arrived in Tassie. My history is Bundy Rum. Started my apprenticeship there in November 1970, so I've coming up to 52 years in the trade. Mainly up in Bundy, working on their vats. I don't know if any of you have been through Bundy, but Bundy matures all their product, or most of their product, in large vats. Up to 75,000 litres. So we were building them, maintaining them, and also any small casks they had. We were also doing maintenance on them and keeping them running. So we also had a tourist attraction up there where we started in 1982. So I worked for Bundy Rum for about 10 or 12 years. Then we started our own business in 82, mainly catering to tourists, making small casks, so from 1 litre through to about 20 or 40 litre. We trained 5. I've trained 5 apprentices in that time, Laurie being the last. And we've always maintained a relationship with Bundy Rum. We've done a lot of their work for them. And we got an order from Timmy Duckett back in 2018, I think it was. For 16 barrels, 1,600 litre barrels, 16 100 litre barrels, I'm sorry. And so Laurie and I made them in our workshop, and I said to Laurie one day, why don't we jump in the car and deliver them, have a look at Tassie. So we did that. We drove down 3 days to get down here, went and seen Tim, really enjoyed what we seen down here, loved the place. And we said to Tim, what do you think? There's thoughts on us moving down here? Any chance for us making a living down here? And he said, shit, yeah, mate. He said, go and see the Adams boys up at Perth near Launceston. They're going places. They've got some stuff happening up there. And so we went and seen Adam Pinkard and had some talks with them, and they built us a shed. And we moved down here on the 24th of February, 2019, and enjoying every minute of it. Love the place. Much more fun working over a fire in Tasmania than it is in Queensland.
I'll bet.
And Laurie, how long have you been in the game, mate? So you did your apprenticeship with your dad, and what happened after that?
So I started my sentence about 14 years ago when I was 14 years old. So school wasn't for me. So I thought I'll go and do something else. So the opportunity came up. They were quite busy at the time with the rum vat. So I jumped in the cooperage with the old man and did my first apprenticeship there. So I was finished that by the time I was about 18. So I went off and I wanted to do a carpentry apprenticeship as well. So I went and did that for a few years and naturally came back to coopering. I've been doing it pretty much since then. So I started up a little business on the Sunshine Coast, doing a lot of small casts, so sort of like what Dad was doing for many years. And I used to do the Monday markets there, so had it pretty casual, had a little shed on the highway at the Sunshine Coast and work a few days a week there, do the markets on the weekends and sell a few casts to tourists and things like that. And when the opportunity came up to come down here, I jumped on board and it's been a great move.
Mm.
Mate, that's really cool.
It would certainly be a temperature change, yes, from slaving away over a fire in Queensland to relative cool in one of the coldest places I've ever been in Tassie. It'd be quite a sea change.
It's much more pleasant. We get a couple of months of the year where you get a few warm days, but you don't get the humidity or the long stretches of hot weather. You can put up with it for half a week or something, and you get a bit of relief there with max of 22 and stuff like that, which is pretty good.
We don't miss walking into a Bond store at Bundy Rum at 7 o'clock in the morning and you're standing there and sweating.
Yeah, no.
And then you start sweating. And then by smoko, you're taking the socks off to wring them out because they're full of water. Don't miss that.
I don't like sweating at the best of times.
Nor do I.
It would actually be atmospheric rum, wouldn't it, with the evaporation that's coming off?
Pretty much, yeah.
So Dave, we've got a question from the audience.
Yeah, we had a couple of comments
on the
too.
screen.
Yep, go for it.
What made you decide to be a Cooper?
Me, back in the day, we only went to grade 10. We weren't that intelligent back then, so we only went as far as grade 10. We couldn't make it to 12. So we put my name down at the old Commonwealth Employment Service halfway through grade 10. Said I was interested in anything to do with timber, thinking carpentry, cabinet making or something like that. And in September, I got a telegram from the CEO saying, from the Commonwealth Employment Service saying there was a job going as an apprentice cooper at Bundy Rum. So I said to Dad, "What's a cooper?" And Dad said, "I don't know, mate." So I asked everyone in the neighbourhood and I couldn't get an answer. No one knew what a cooper was. So I went over for the interview, found out what a cooper was, got the job, fell in love with it, been doing it ever since.
Wow. How many barrels do you reckon you've made?
I don't want to even think about that. Thousands of the bloody things. That's why one of the great parts about moving down here to Tassie is it's reinvigorated everything, really, because the whiskey industry is so different to working in rum and working with souvenir casks. It's so involved, and just learning everything about it. And I'm finding I'm learning a lot of stuff off my son here now, because he's modern age where he'll go on. If he wants to know something, he'll Google it and he'll get the answers. He won't just look at one answer. He'll go through and siphon out what's fact and what bullshit out of half a dozen different posts or whatever. And so he's gaining a lot of knowledge by doing that. And I go and ask him stuff now because he knows a lot more about that sort of gear than me. When it comes down to like toasting a barrel and jarring barrels, that's really, really important part of making a keg. It's the most important part of making a keg, I believe, is actually the toasting of your barrel. Yeah. And that's where Laurie really excels. He's got that down to a fine art. And
so you enjoy playing with fire?
Yeah.
That's a short answer. Yeah.
Tomorrow's cooking in our workshop.
Yeah, lovely. Not real good when they put fire bands on, though. It's a bit awkward.
We get visits from the Rural Fire Brigade occasionally, wondering what we sort of
just checking, make sure
there's all the black smoke hanging over our building. I think something's going wrong.
I'd like to talk about toast and char because they are two totally different things, right?
Yes.
And you often hear in the whiskey industry, it's all about char. It's all about char. It's all about char. But we know in the industry, people know that, no, it's not just about char, it's toast and char. And the nuances of the whiskey can be developed through selection of toast and char. So, Laurie, can you explain to people, in your terms, what is the difference of toast and char, and what is the importance of toast and char? And then I want to talk about shave, toast, and re-char. So STR thing, Dr. Swan. So over to you, mate.
Yeah, so the main difference between toasting and charring is basically your toasting is a prolonged radiant heat, causing chemical reactions in the timber from the heat, caramelizing a lot of the natural sugars in the timber, as well as a lot of the sugars in the timber from the previous fill. Because we are working a lot of fortified casks, you're working with pretty high sugar content stuff. So you're basically, the best way to look at your toast is you're creating a layer through the inside of your stave, typically of about 3 to 4 millimeters, which is an extra layer of flavor, which will add a layer of complexity to your whiskey that you wouldn't otherwise get. So your whiskey is obviously going to go beyond that into that seasoned wood anyway, and in most cases will actually go past that into virgin wood as well. So it's like an extra layer of flavour. It differs from the char in the way that the char it's a really fast heat, and you're actually igniting the interior surface of the cask and putting that layer of carbon on there, which is an extractive layer which cleans up the spirit, so it'll strip out a lot of the sulfurs and the volatiles as the spirit moves through into the wood and then back out of the wood.
So you're going to see a lot of different flavors coming out depending on whether it's a toast or a char.
Yep.
Do you have a preference?
Yes. Probably the toasting. The toasting is definitely the most exciting because we're working such a variety of different oak types, different pre-fill types, different moisture contents in the wood that we're working them. We try to get them down to an optimal moisture content, but there is always variables in what we're doing, and every cask is different. So it's not like in a large wine barrel cooperage where they've really got that down to a fine art, and the winemaker knows what they're expecting from that cooper in terms of a toast. We're sort of not working with that same profile where at what temperature you're going to get certain chemical reactions to create certain flavors. We have that to a certain extent, but we're also working, with so many different things that we try and box it into a set of characteristics more than try and nail it right down like that. So with like a light toast, for instance, where we're looking at putting enough heat back into the timber after we bend it to set the cask into shape without affecting the flavor too much. With a medium toast, we're focusing on that impression of sweetness. It's kind of like walking into someone baking a batch of cookies, or you get like banana bread with a Jack Daniel cask, or blueberry muffins with a pork cask. It's that sort of aroma. Then with a heavy toast, you get into the really spicy end where you're pulling out those, clove with your French oak and coconut with your American oak, and a lot of smoky flavors and things like that. And then with your char, it kind of is a completely different thing. Again, once you nose the cask, you get those aromas come out, but you tend to get more of the spicy, intense aromas coming through once it's fully been ignited.
Mate, that is such an articulate, easy way you've just described it. It's
it's
mate, that was seriously
it's an art form to finish it.
Round of applause. Now, I've just thoughts popped in my head as you've said all that, and I've never actually thought of it this way before. So effectively, when you char a barrel, you're actually not sealing as such, but you're covering the toast, and
yes,
you've got so you're sandwiching the toast into the barrel. So
yeah, exactly.
And I've never actually made that connection. That the toast and the char is sandwiched it. Okay, you've got a huge surface area, and obviously the spirit can penetrate, but you are sealing in that toast. That's I'm having a bit of a moment here.
We can tell.
It does.
We also think it's very important to shave out before you toast or char as well. So
Okay, explain.
So we'll, with a X fortified, we make sure we take off about 1 mil of timber off the inside, get rid of all the tartrate that's been left behind or the residue. As we find, if you leave that in there, you create a lot of bitter notes. If you burn sugar, it goes bitter. So we make sure we get rid of that. Shavings, the 3 things that are important, or the 2 most important things we believe in making a keg is you got to shave them out correctly, and then you must toast. The toasting is the big one. That's what's going to give you complexity of flavour. And then your char is also important, do that filtration at the end of it all.
Do you find with most of your customers, particularly your Tassie distillers, are they all sort of going for the same sort of toast level, char level? Or you got some that are going, no, just I want alligator all the way, and others are going, no, I want a much lighter char?
They're becoming a lot more educated now, I think. They're starting to learn that you can make a difference to your whiskey by doing different toastings and different chars to them.
Yep.
So I would say 60% would be just saying, you just make us a barrel, where the other 40% are being very particular of what they want. And I see that getting more and more so as time goes by. It's like a winemaker. You go to a winemaker and say, ask them what's the 2 most important things with the barrel. And they'll say the origin of the timber and the toasting.
Yeah.
And they'll buy barrels from a particular cooperage all the time because they know that their toasting suits their style of wine. So very important.
So Jim Vella on Facebook has said, do you shave ex-bourbon and rum barrels?
Yes. Shave everything.
With the bourbon.
Rechar bourbon barrels?
Yeah. So if it's just going out straight fit for fill, they can go out and be filled right away. If they're requested to be retoasted and recharred, unless it's like a Jack Daniel or something like that where they have been toasted before, we'll actually get the hollowing knife and take out about 1 mil or 2 mil just to get back into a bit of fresh wood that hasn't been affected by the heat. But most of your stuff, you're working your Heaven Hill and stuff like that, pretty much just like a wire wheel basically goes around and takes the carbon off plus about 1 mil of timber, give or take. And that allows us then to give it a good toast and then completely rechar again on top of that. And the same with a rum cask. Anything that was previously charred will pretty much get the wire brush treatment unless it's been toasted previously.
Wow. Okay. What about wine barrels? I've had experience, and I know other distillers have had experience where they've sourced the wine barrel. It's gone to the cooperage, and the cooper's rung up and said, "Mate, staves are too thin. I can't work with this wood." Do you encounter that? And if you do, what's the reason for the thin staves?
With your typically, if the cask hasn't been shaved, we don't see a lot of that here in Tassie because there hasn't been a lot of that going on, shaving of wine barrels, but you might see it quite a bit more with wine casks coming out of Vic and SA, where there's been guys doing shave outs, which is great for the wine. But once we get it to turn into whiskey, if we're going to want to take another 1 or 2 mil off that, you can be getting down to sort of 18, 19 mil, which is no good, particularly when you're putting heat back in and toasting and stuff like that. But if you see like your Bordeaux casks, like your Cabernet barrels and stuff like that from France, where they have the crossboards in the head with the wedges in them, that's typically an indication that it's a 21 mil stave instead of a 27 mil. So that's typically your dead giveaway. If you see the crossboard in there, probably a good thing to avoid. That's not to say that you can't rework them, but you're significantly decreasing the life of the cask and increasing the chance that you're going to have problems with it, in terms of broken staves and things like that down the line.
All right. Okay. Now let's talk about a project that I've got with you guys and walk me through it, how you will approach this project. I'm fascinated. So I got a bourbon barrel and I got an ex-Amaro barrel, which was originally a bourbon barrel, and they're both American oak. So you've got those 2 barrels, and the plan is to make, if possible, 2 bourbon/Amaro barrels out of those 2 barrels. How do you approach a project like that?
In what way?
Just walk me through the process. So they're 2 bourbon barrels. They're different bourbon barrels. One's had Amaro in. So obviously that's
Yep.
going to have an impact on the wood and that. What are you looking at? So you break it down to staves and headwoods, and you look at the wood, and then how will you marry the bourbon with the Amaro? Is there a way you'll approach that, or just you look at individual staves?
Yeah, you want them both combined the timbers into the barrels. Yeah, we'll just lay it all out. We'll dock them to length, lay it all out, see what we've got, and then we'll just try and blend 50-50 of those timbers to create the two different barrels. We then rejoint everything. We always add a bit of bilge to our barrels. So a bourbon barrel, as you'd be aware of, is very, very straight. So we rejoint everything and add bilge to it. And then we'll shave them out before we raise them up. So we'll shave it all out, raise it up, and then go through the process of bending, toasting, charring, and working through it that way. Yep. And then the heads we'll probably do one of each in the heads. Put one bourbon, one Amaro in one, and likewise in the other.
Why do you put the bilge in it?
Just makes a better looking cask. It makes them easier to set to shape up. With a bourbon cask, they're real mongrel things. You can have 3 different bilges in the one cask. They'll vary quite dramatically. So if you just try and stand it straight back up again, you have trouble getting everything to line up. Like you'll have staves in and out because you'll have 3/8 of an inch difference or 10 mil difference in bilges in them or bends in them. So by adding a little bit of bilge, when you raise it up, we just raise it up with 3 hoops on the one end, and it's like an upside down bucket basically. And you'll have some staves that are nearly got the right shape. Others will be very straight. So then when you put it over the fire and heat it up, when we start to draw it in, we can then panel beat everything into shape. So we'll end up with a nice uniform barrel. Whereas if you try and do that without heating it up and rebending it, it's a nightmare. It's very difficult. Plus you end up with something that looks very similar to a pipe, very straight, no character to it.
And it makes it really hard to work on too if they're quite straight. You can spend 6 months trying to get a hoop down onto a bilge on a really straight bourbon barrel. You put that little bit more bilge in. There is a line too. If you put too much bilge in, they can be as big a pain in the bum. But you get that nice shape. It helps with racking for the distillers as well. We see a lot of ladder racking, particularly down here in Tassie. If you get a nice, even, consistent bilge all the way through, everything racks up pretty good. And seems to be the way to go. And it's going on the fire anyway, so we may as well, while we're warming it up, get in there, get it all smooth. We don't sand our barrels on a big sanding machine. We literally just stripe the joints with a spoke shave. So the closer we can get it on the fire, the easier it is for us down the track to get it all looking good and nice and round.
Basically, we're pretty lazy and we try and make it as easy as we can for ourselves.
Pretty much, yeah.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
You are explaining the craft of what you do, guys, and as distillers, and distillers just means distillers, but we do a lot more than just distill. But distillers, the relationship they have with Coopers, in my opinion and other people's opinions, is absolutely fundamental to how successful we are as making whiskey. And it's not a case of just putting an order in and getting a barrel and that's it. It's all about the barrel. It's understanding the barrel, and it's the education and the training that we as distillers need to manage our wood when it's in our sheds. And you provide that, which is awesome. So,
we'd like to, in the future, do a little bit of education in the way of, especially with distillers, give them a little bit of insight on what's required in maintaining barrels, selecting barrels.
Oh man, he's taking all my questions.
Yeah, barrel selection. I think it's the next step. I really do. I
agree. It's so important.
So that they're more self-sufficient. If you buy a barrel and you get it into your bond store and you fill it up and it starts leaking or it's not performing like it should do, you want to be able to have a look at it and try and be able to rectify those problems yourself.
Yep.
If it's serious, if it's the Cooper's fault, well, obviously you got to give them a kick in the ass. But But if it's something simple that you can rectify yourself, I think it's going to be a big step forward to do that. And that's something we'd like to see happen going forward. Is a bit of training in that field.
Yeah. Now, there's a few Coopers that are saying the same thing. That it's the next stage, and it's important. And I think you'll find if you talk to distillers, they're very receptive to it, because they realise that the barrel is so important. It contributes a big amount to the flavour of the whiskey. But not only that, it's a holding vessel. So after all your hard work, if you have a leaky barrel, it's not good.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I don't like walking into a bond store and seeing one of our barrels with a leak in it. I don't like that.
No, I'm sure you don't.
Unfortunately,
Wonderful. So we've had a question come through from Mark at Snowy Mountain Spirits there. Hi guys, it seems there's a movement away from small casks. Are you seeing this as well?
Yeah, we've now in the last couple of months have adopted the policy that we're no longer doing anything under 50 litre.
Yep.
Main couple of reasons. One, again, we're a bit lazy. We don't want to make them anymore. And two, I think I can understand why distillers do it, why they go into small casks. They're outlaying so much money, and they need to get a return on that money as quick as they can. So obviously you put it in a smaller cask, you're going to get a quick turnaround. But not necessarily are you going to get a really high quality whiskey. So we'd sooner see people put stuff down in a minimum of 100 litre, take a little bit more time, and end up with a better product at the end of the day. We're not starting off in 20s and then you've got to put out a product that is okay, but not quite there. And then in 6 years' time, 7 years' time, when you start bringing out your hundreds, you've got a whole totally different profile product coming through. You've got to re-educate it. So if it can be afforded, I reckon you start off with as big a format as you possibly can and go from there rather than going to the small format.
Yeah, okay. Laurie, I'm a crazy distiller. I come to you and I go, mate, I want to build a barrel and I want you to make it in French oak and American oak. What do you say? What do you do?
Well, it depends on the oak itself. So if you come with a really fine grained Chardonnay cask or something like that, that's very soft, very slow growing, and then you want to mix that with a really, really coarse grained American oak, I'd probably say no. Even if you do mix those in evenly around the cask, you're mixing a lot of hard and soft, which structurally can cause a lot of problems. It's not to say that it will 100%, but I wouldn't really back it. If you can kind of get some finer grained American oak, something grown a little bit further north, and like a limousine oak or something like that, which is a slightly different species to your typical French oak, it's quite a bit coarser grain. You can definitely match those together without any problem at all. But it can be done, but you can also run into issues if you don't match your coarseness of your grain or your fineness of your grain up properly.
And with French oak, my understanding is you basically you can't run it through the bandsaw like you can with American oak. It has to be axed. Is that true, or is that just an urban myth?
Like when they're milling the timber?
When they're milling the timber, yeah.
Yeah, so they actually do split it. The main reason being is if you imagine, your log like that, you're basically breaking it into quarters and then eighths. The reason for that is they split it along those rays that dissect it into those quarters. Right. The main reason is they're actually porous. So there's a process that oak goes through after about 70 years, which is called tylosis. And in those lines, which are called your medullary rays, there's a little balloon that forms, which prevents that from becoming as porous as what it otherwise would be. It happens to a lesser extent in French oak, and because of that, they actually have to cut it perfectly along those, so that when you look at the end of the cask, those rays are actually running all the way around the circumference. You don't want a part of that ray directed towards the inside, pointing towards the outside, because that can actually act as a wick and cause the spirit to come out of the cask. With American oak, they will saw the timber. So with sawing, you get slightly less waste, but you do also get a little bit of grain that typically you won't want to see it any more than 45 degrees. But that's the main reason, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Another question that we often hear is, I'm using European oak. No, I'm using French oak. What is the difference?
Basically, French oak just has the name of French oak with the whole terroir or whatever you want to call it. It's grown in that region, so it's French oak. It comes out of the wine industry. And I was speaking to a bloke the other day. Actually, he was a Hungarian cooper, and he said that the oak can't speak French or Hungarian, so it's the same thing. So you can get Quercus petraea out of Vosges or Tronçon in France, and you can get Quercus petraea out of one of the high forests in Hungary, and it's essentially the same thing. But when you get down, same species, you basically have your two species that you see out of Europe, which is Quercus petraea, which is what's typically known as French oak, excepting Limousin oak, which is the other species, which is called Quercus robur, which is you see quite a bit of that out of Hungary. Your stuff out of Spain is typically Quercus robur, and it's typically a coarser grained oak, more similar to American oak.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, same species, just different regions.
This is a deep dive, guys, and now we're in a deep dive. We're going to take a pause because it's the time. He's waiting patiently. We've taken all his questions away. So,
and now it's time for Throw the Todd under the bus.
And now it's Todd's time to ask him some questions. Todd, go.
Okay, so I'm a new distiller, and I've just bought my first lot of barrels from all over the place. When I get to the shed, what should I be looking for to just check that they're okay before I fill them up?
Make sure that probably check around the heads first. So you want to check the joins in your heads first and foremost, and the joins around the staves where the head meets in, because they're going to be the first parts that shrink. So if they've shrunk, there's a good chance that your hoops are going to be loose. So you're going to want to get the hammer and driver out and harden the hoops up. Should that not be sufficient, you're probably going to have to look at putting a bit of hot water in there, probably 5 litres, 10 litres, depending on the size of the cask, end for end it until it swells up. And if that doesn't work, then you're going to have to send it to the cooper and get it fixed up.
Okay, cool. And should I store my barrels outside beside an old railway sleeper?
It's loaded with boron.
Not if you don't want holes all through it.
And yes, we've done that. And yes,
I was about to say that's from experience, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not my personal experience, but someone else I know closely.
Yeah, okay.
It was like someone had taken a drill bit to the barrel. There was holes, seriously, holes that big in it, and the borer beetle was about that big. It was So those barrels apparently are now called sacrificial barrels to the borer, and you just
an offering.
offering to the borer gods.
Sadly, they're quite nice barrels too. But anyway,
Oh,
I don't have those anymore.
Any more questions?
Yeah. What's the most unique barrel that you've been asked to or you've been commissioned to make?
Actually, probably the most unique one, it would be the we've done an egg. We did an egg for Adams. That was a bit of a brainwave I had. I thought I'd give it a go, and it'd be the first and last time. We actually had good friends of ours up in Queensland have a winery and cider house, and they made they had a farm in Childers where they grew a heap of jaboticaba, which is a Brazilian fruit. And if you look up a photo of the tree, they're a pretty wild looking thing, and it's essentially like a grape, but it actually grows on the trunk and the limbs of the tree. It's a really bizarre looking thing, and they had a heap of those, and they made some port out of the Jabotacaba. So they had an old Jabotacaba port barrel, which we've made up into a cask, and we're planning to find some spirit to fill in it ourselves, just for something a little bit different. That's probably the most left of field in terms of previous fill, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
What about hardwoods? Do you get much call for working with hardwoods at all?
No, not really.
Woods? Is it hard?
Yeah, probably a bit lazy for that as well, I reckon. It's porous and it's hard. We do a lot of stuff with hand tools, so it's probably a little bit too gnarly on the tools, and and yeah, I've not personally tasted anything out of a hardwood cask, but we hear mixed reviews from it. So if I tasted something and I really liked it, then that would probably pique a bit of interest and make me more willing to have a crack at it. But yeah, until then, probably no.
So given what we were talking about at the start of our chat with the wood shortage, do you think that's going to drive the use of other non-oak timbers, more Australian-based timbers? We've got the backwoods red gum cask whiskey that's come out. Do you think that's going to become more prominent?
I can't see it happening. I think they'll go to use. They'll keep on. I think instead of doing that, you'd be better off going second and third fill. Get more life out of your cask, and maybe do a bit of seasoning in between. Yeah. You got to have a few things in your timber to make it work for a barrel. It's got to be able to bend for a starter. Not all timbers will bend. It needs to be non-porous. A lot of timbers, you fill it up and the alcohol will go straight through it. And it's got to give a flavour. It's got to give a flavour that's going to enhance what you put in it, not detract from it. We see a little bit of blackwood come through. Blackwood was used quite a few years ago for beer barrels and for fermenters and stuff like that, because it does bend very good. The bending timber quite tough. A lot of old port barrels we get have been repaired, and some of the staves they've been repaired with have been blackwood.
I've never heard of blackwood. So, okay.
Yep.
What sort of flavour profile blackwood?
Pretty common stuff that's been made in around the 70s, 60s and 70s. You see it. It's not every barrel. But you get it. Probably 1 in every 20 will see a blackwood stave out of a barrel of that age. Never seen one that's totally blackwood, but we see them with replacements. They've obviously had staves replaced and have been replaced with blackwood.
Right.
What sort of flavour profile would black? Because I don't know it. What you say?
Very tanniny. It's very high in tannins, even more higher than American oak. So you will pull a lot of bitter flavours through your whiskey. All your beer barrels back in the day were made from, a lot of them. They were made either out of American oak, mountain ash or Tassie blackwood, and Western Australian she oak. But a beer barrel, the old beer barrels, if you had set up in the bar and the pub, they were all pitch lined. So there was special brewer's pitch they were coated with internally. So your beer never actually come in contact with the wood, so you weren't pulling any of those flavours out of your timber.
Yeah, right.
So there was a blackwood, Western Australian she oak used in those fellas. I've even seen some. A lot of the heads were rosewood from New South Wales, northern New South Wales. And you know how, I don't know if you had anything to do with that, but it's very, very aromatic.
Right.
But they were good timbers to work, plentiful, and they used that stuff.
Yeah, okay.
And Jim Bella on Facebook is asking about Cecil oak.
Yeah, that's your Quercus petraea. So there you'll hear sessile oak and pedunculate oak, and it's referring to the acorn and the leaf. It's the way that the acorn grows. The pedunculate oak has like a little stem on the acorn.
Yeah.
So that's sessile oak's your Quercus petraea.
Yeah. Okay.
So just a variety.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, you learn something today.
You learn something new every day.
We had a comment from Boone, Josh Walker, earlier in the piece. What was his comment? It was something about a new Cooper. What was that about?
Josh,
yeah,
heard you had a new Cooper in the shed today. What would you rate him out of 10?
He wants to know.
I reckon he's a 7 approaching an 8.
Ooh.
Oh.
No, we've had Heath in for the last couple of days, doing a little bit of training and working in with us, and sort of showing him a little bit how we do things in our cooperage. And it's been really good experience having him in there. And yeah.
One of the cool things about my experiences with the Coopers that I work with, like yourselves and others, is the level of transparency, right? So as distillers, various distillers have various degrees of transparency. But what I find with Coopers, they all seem to have a very high level of transparency. It's because you guys, you want to help us because we can help ourselves, isn't it? The more we understand about wood, the better it is for you guys.
Yeah, we get pretty passionate about it because we know how much effort, as I said before, we know how much effort you guys and expense you guys put into producing a nice clean spirit, and you want to get results at the end of the day. So we're driven a lot by that fact that we want to make sure that in 3, 5, 10, whatever years time, that when you take that product out of the barrel, you're going to say, wow, that's good shit. We don't want you to screw your nose up and come looking for us and take our head off. A little bit of self-preservation involved there as well. So that's one. That's a driving factor for us in a big way. And so we get a lot of satisfaction. We work with a lot of small guys. Some of the guys that we're dealing with, we've made all their casks since they've opened up. They've sort of started up around the same time as us or after we've arrived. So it's great walking into a distillery and the guys come out, come and have a taste of this, Dave. This one's a cracker. And it gives you a hell of a buzz to know that you're producing something that's really good. And
it's satisfying.
Very rewarding.
Actually, I've got a couple of your casks, the original rum casks I filled. They're getting pretty close to drawing a sample, mate. So, I'll get something down to you, let you know how old it is.
Sounds good.
Get dead keen to taste it, I tell you, because they were just incredible aromatics on the nose when we filled them. Yeah. And just the empty barrels was just rich, dense flavors, and pretty exciting.
They were the barrels that we got when we got the Adams barrel?
Yes, they were. Yeah, remember, Dave? You dropped it off. You and Pam dropped it off.
Yeah, we called in.
And you bought
that was back then.
3 years ago.
They were fantastic smelling.
It was November 19.
Yeah. So for those who don't know the backstory, I filled a little 20-litre cask with the Adams, way back when I started. And it was sitting in Tasmania, and I'm going, Jesus, how am I going to get it up here? It was ready, and it was like sitting in the cask. How am I going to get it up here? And so Dave and Pam kindly brought my barrel up when they delivered my rum casks that they dropped off. So, and then you went off to Black Snake.
Sorry?
I said, then you went off to Black Snake in Narrabri.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So are you going to say, Dave?
Then we went to Coffs Harbour.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
Then we went to Bundaberg. We done a real zigzag across New South Wales that trip. That was fun.
That's a fair chunk of the country.
Yeah. You must be due, coming out of Tassie, and you'd be chomping at the bit to get back to Queensland, wouldn't you? And do a bit of a road trip.
Oh yeah, for sure. Can't wait.
So we've had a question come in from Dave and Carolyn Taylor, asking, where do you see your industry in the next 10 years?
That's a great question.
Retire.
Personally, I'll probably be retired. But although I do tell everyone that I'm going to hang around until I'm about 100 and annoy the crap out of them, because especially my kids, they annoyed the crap out of me for the first 20 years. So
it's only fair. It's only fair.
It's only fair.
Yep.
Yeah. But there's got to be some changes made. There's got to be a lot of training come forth to educate people into making barrels. And unless that's done, a lot of Coopers around are my vintage, or getting close to it. So I don't know where they're going to come from. I know Robbie, the Barrel Brokers,
Robbie Todd
pop up there. John Carberry is coming across to set up a cooperage with those guys. So and he's interested in doing a lot of training. So that's going to be great for the industry.
Absolutely.
He's bringing a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills with him, which would be fantastic.
Yep.
Unfortunately, a lot of the guys that have come through the industry in the last 20 or 30 years have done a lot of machine work.
Yeah.
You need people of my sort of vintage that came through using a lot of hand tools. The hand tool side of it is important, especially when you're doing shave outs, second fills, where you've got to replace staves and stuff like that. You need to have those hand skills, use those hand tools to be able to do those necessary repairs to make a good cask at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If you walk through our workshop, you'd shake your head. We actually bought our first piece of coopering equipment the other day. We bought a hoop roller. Everything else in our workshop is basic cabinet making stuff and hand tools. What I might do tomorrow is I'll take some video of Laurie cutting in, crozing out the top of a cask, adzing off the top, doing the howl, cutting the crows in. So if we're making anything over 100 litres, it's all hand tools. Everything's done with hand tools.
Mate, we'll put that on Shooting of the Shit Facebook page. If you've got something you want to share there. Because
I'll do a bit of video tomorrow and shoot it through to you. And I defy too many other people in Australia to do what my son can do. It's bloody hard work. It's very, very skillful, especially the ads work. And once you see it, you'll understand. I came through.
That sounds like words of a pretty proud dad there.
Oh, well, you got to be, mate. You got to be.
You're doing all right.
Taught him everything. You still know stuff here, but besides that, but the ads he uses, I came through using with my training. My training at Bundy Rum, we've mainly done maintenance on barrels. Okay, we weren't making, we were maintaining barrels. They'd come into our workshop, we'd repair them, make them fit to go back into circulation. So we'd be changing out staves and making new heads and so forth. So we had to be able to use hand tools. We had a bandsaw and a planer in our workshop. That's all we had. Everything else was hand tools. So I cursed it like hell when I was a young bloke, and I thought I was being deprived because I didn't get to play with the big toys. But now I really appreciate the fact that I did learn those skills, and I've been able to pass a lot of that on to Laurie, and he's taken it to another step. Our ads is the ads that I'm used to is a typical English style ads. I don't know if any of you are familiar with an ads, but looks like a hoe.
No. Okay.
I've not heard that term.
In your garden. Whereas the ads that Laurie uses is a French style ads, and it's the ugliest looking thing you'll ever come across in a long day's walk. Probably 100 years old, but it's you use two hands. We'll put it up on the video tomorrow, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. I'll show the original English style ads plus the French ads.
Yeah.
And it's quite a skillful art to do.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find a picture online of something just so I can see exactly what that is.
While you're doing that, I just want to relay a beautiful story, and you guys will appreciate this. So Jim McEwen, ex-Bowmore, the resurrection of Brooke Laddie and that. So he started as a boy in Bowmore. He learnt coopering and eventually got to the stage where he was running the distillery. They left Bowmore and went to Brooke Laddie. Anyway, his mentor, who was a cooperer, was pretty well on his deathbed, and so people came over to say farewell to this. I can't remember the guy's name, unfortunately, and Jim was there, and he said to his mentor, he said, "Look, come on, get out of bed. We've got to work on the wood, sort of thing. Come on, we've got things to do." And he said, "Jim, I've left you a little something in the garden shed." And he goes, "Okay, thanks." Then the guy passed away, Then Jim and his mentor's wife went out to the garden shed. Didn't know what it was, jumping around on the floorboards. There was a leaky, creaky floorboard, lifted the floorboard, and it was the guy's old cooperage tools. And they were in a linseed sack from memory, and they were as sharp as that, and they were ready to go. And what he was basically saying is, I've left you my tools, right? You'll always be able to make a coin. Use them. And when I first heard that, I thought, wow, they're passing on something like that. And there is such a legacy and such an art form in cooperage, hand cooperage, not machine cooperage, but hand cooperage. So, which is very cool. And Laurie, I'd love to know, once we open up completely, and you want to continue your journey of exploration, because it's obvious that you're thirsty for knowledge and you're out there and you're researching. Where do you want to go on the planet? What's the place you want to go and experience something and further your knowledge in regards to coopering?
I'd like to go to as many places as I could, but I would say the peak for me would probably be France, just with the way that they've held on to the tradition, with the way they do their apprenticeships and still train everybody on the hand tools. They've got schools over there for it. To me, and also getting into some of the toasting rooms over there and really getting into the nitty gritty of wine toasting, which is on a whole nother level to what we do with the nuance and how spot on it's got to be. Probably France would be a place that I would like to spend a bit of time, and then Spain, working on the big butts, over in Scotland working on the ASBs, and they work on quite a few butts over there as well, on a more production sort of line with the hand tools, which would be really good to hone that fast pace combined with the skill that they do over there, which I find amazing. Like, I can do the hand tool stuff, but I could not keep up with the blokes over there. When you see them working, they're just on another level. So just go everywhere and do the journeyman thing, I guess, the old school way, and learn from everyone and just give it a good crack.
And video blog it, mate. Video blog it the whole way.
Now, I found so it's an ADZE, an adze axe, and that's a modern example of it.
Wow, that's a Viking weapon.
That's the little one.
That's little
it's
one.
The one we use is a similar concept, or the French one is, but it basically looks like a mixing bowl, like a stainless steel mixing bowl. If you cut that in a quarter, it's got that basically forged onto the end of it. The bit comes down sort of flush with the handle and
like
sort
a parrot's beak,
chop down like that. You could eat your cereal out of it if you were that way inclined.
I've found another one here that might be closer to. It's got a bit more of a bucket on it. Let's see if I can upload that quickly as well. Let's see whether this one. So that's got a bit more of a bucket on it.
Yeah. It's a little bit bigger than that one, the one that we use. Yeah, it's around about 5 pound, the adze itself. So you actually don't have to work too hard with it. It does all of the work for you, and because you're chopping down with the English pattern, you're chopping back towards your leg. With these, we work up in a cradle. The cask is at a good height. You can stand with a straight back and basically just chop down with it, and the tool just does the work for you.
So, how many injuries? How often have you had an injury?
I was going to say that.
And also, back towards your hand. Yeah, how many fingers have you got?
Show your fingers.
Still got 10.
Got them all.
Got as many.
And to add to Luke's comment, I want to know, how the hell do you drive with a hoop driver and not smash your hand?
I still smash my hand for sure. That's probably the most injuries I cop is from the driver, particularly when you're trussing casts, pulling them in on the fire, because we don't use a winch. We truss them all by hand, so we have a series of 3 mil steel hoops, and we warm the cask on the fire, and you have a series of hoops that we walk around and drive them down and to slowly pull it into shape. And often there you get a bit carried away and walk fast. Dad tried to teach me when I started to drag my foot, and I naturally didn't listen. So I walk around the cask, and it always ends up that you step at the same place where your driver is hitting. And when you mishit your driver, it's supposed to shoot through and hit the floor. But if you're wearing steel caps, it'll hit the top of your foot. And if you're not wearing steel caps, it's guaranteed to hit your toe. So I do that quite a bit. And also miss the driver completely if I'm distracted and hit the top of your hand around the thumb there. Do that a bit. But no broken bones. Still got all the fingers.
What's
you haven't developed a squeaky voice from the ads.
Yeah, not yet. Fingers crossed on that one.
What's the biggest splinter you've had?
Had a few of them. I don't know.
We used to get some good ones out of the vats,
Yeah.
out of the big vats when we were building them for Bundy. You'd hand in big timber and you're sliding your hand down stuff, and I've had some pretty nasty splinters out of that stuff.
They go right the way in.
Yeah, and they burn. They burn nicely.
Oh, well, they're already sterilized, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Not when they're brand new. They're not.
I don't know.
You're going to go and rush and find something to sterilise them with.
Yeah. Let's talk about cooperages in Tasmania. Let's talk about Tasmania and the whiskey scene. So there's 60 distilleries in Tasmania now. I don't know what percentage of those are making whiskey, but cooperage. There's how many cooperages are there in Tassie now? And how do you what's the relationship between the coopers?
We all get on fantastically well together. There's 3 cooperages. There's ourselves. There's Tascasco down at Hobart, and Tas Tiger, which is set up at Sheen, which is now will be owned by Lark going forward. I think Johnny Abraham, who was part of Sheen, he's retained the cooperage until February next year. He's leasing it back off a Lark. So after that, they will take ownership of that, and then I believe John will be looking at building another cooperage then at Oaklands to satisfy his requirements there. So there's 3 at Cullington Mill, So at present, there's 3 cooperages. We're probably the smallest. We have the least amount of equipment. John spent a lot of money on equipment at Sheen when he built the cooperage there. Got very modern, very up-to-date gear. And I think there's usually about 4 guys working in there, but they also do a lot of other work for the distillery as well. They're not cooping the full time. And then you've got Tascasco. I think the last I heard, maybe 12 to 15 guys working in there, putting out about 100, 120 barrels a week.
So who's heading up Tascasco now?
Pardon?
Who's heading up Tascasco now? It was Steve Mark, was a guy I used to deal with years ago. He moved on. Who's the main contact at Tascasco now?
I think now Scotty Quinn was there for a long time when we first came down. Scott's no longer there.
Maybe Troy, I think.
Troy Smith, is it? Troy was the last guy I dealt with there. He's a hell of a nice guy. But I think most of your contact now is done through Andrew at Master Cask in South Australia.
Yeah, of course. Because he's part of SA and Tascasco.
Yeah.
And what about the first cooperage I ever met? And he was a great guy, larger than life, was Adam Boney. Where's Boney nowadays? Is he on the scene?
No, Boney. I don't think Boney's doing a great deal these days. I've only met Boney on 2 occasions, and both of those occasions were after he sold out Tascasco. I think he may have had an exclusion on him for a few years where he couldn't actually go back into coopering.
Right.
I believe he's not doing anything in the coopering line at the moment. I'm not sure exactly what he's up to. I think he may have a little bit of health issue. I'm not sure. If someone said to us the other day he was maybe a little bit, may have a health issue as well, but that's only hearsay. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, we wish him well. We wish Adam well. So talk about the whiskey scene then. Talk about the Tasmanian whiskey scene. As Coopers, how do you see the vibrancy of the Tasmanian whiskey scene? What's exciting you about the Tassie whiskey scene?
It's alive at the moment. It's really, really buzzing. A lot of small guys coming onto the market, which is great to see. And then you've got your bigger guys like your Callingtons that Johnny Ibrahim's doing at Oatlands at Callington Mill. That's a fantastic structure that he's put up there. It's a real showcase, that place.
Yeah.
And then Lark with what they're doing down there, that's massive. They're going to really put the face of Tassie on the map as far as whiskey is concerned. Overeem doing big things. Hellier's Road, you don't hear much of Hellier's Road. You know, they've got a fantastic setup up there as well. It's really, and a couple of young guys out of Bicheno, Warbs Harbour.
They're doing some interesting stuff, aren't they?
That's going to be brilliant, that place, when it's up and running. Really, really nice guys. And that's what we find with the whiskey industry. We haven't met anyone that you wouldn't like to call a mate. They're all great people. Damien Makey, there's some real gentlemen out there. Damien Makey from Newtown Distillery. Chris Condon from Launceston. You would not meet a better person anywhere. And there's just so many good people. And we just, Lower Marshes, the guys at Lower Marshes, Steve and Corey down there, only small distillery. But, they're doing really great things, growing their own barley, malting it themselves. True paddock.
You left out a couple of local lads, your neighbours.
The Adams boys. The Adams boys. They've got some fairly big plans going on there.
When don't they have big plans?
Not since I've met them, they haven't.
No.
They're planning to do big stuff there. Taking a little bit longer than they would like, I feel. But, I think in another 12, 18 months, they might be up and producing again.
And Sullivan's Cove have just landed a big round of funding as well, haven't they?
Yeah,
3.3 million.
Yeah. Sullivan's Cove make a brilliant whiskey. Heather, the head distiller there, is a fantastic person, very, very knowledgeable. She'd be one of the most knowledgeable people we've ever spoken to in the whiskey industry.
Yeah.
She's brilliant.
We had her in for a toasting one time, and it was just mind-blowing, the knowledge that she has with the whole thing. It was great. Learned so much from her, just toasting some casks and trying to pick her brain as much as we could. It was great.
Lovely person, great deal of knowledge.
Lovely person, great deal of knowledge. And she came from the wine background, and she just brought in a whole different skill set. She's definitely kicking some goals down there. There's
another guy up in Queensland, Adam Chapman. I don't know if you've heard of Adam at all. He's an ex-winemaker, and he's the distiller for a distillery at the Sunshine Coast called Cavu, CAVU. He is absolutely. He's up there with Heather. He's brilliant as far as rum's concerned. He's brought all his winemaking skills into the production of rum, and he's taken it to another level. He's going to be. Watch that space. They're going to be producing some really, really high class rums.
So the Cavu website says not the makers of Australia's finest rum yet.
Yeah. Very confident people.
Very nice.
I think they launched they have their launch next on the 22nd. The
22nd of the 2nd.
2/22 on the 22nd of the 2nd. They launched their first rum. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Make a point of putting that up on.
I don't know if I got them all right or not.
We double check. we don't want to cause a panic unnecessarily. So make sure the facts are right.
But people like him and people like Heather, they'll drive the industry to another level. That's for sure. And like Chris Condon, he's got such passion in the business as well. And the Adams boys have got so much passion. Johnny Ibrahim, those types of people are really going to. I'm only talking about people that I know down here. And I'm sure there's a lot more up in the mainland, yourself included. The passionate you people have. This industry can only be successful, and you get stronger and more successful as time goes by, I believe. I'm just ashamed that I'm not 40 years younger to enjoy a lot more of it.
Well, you get to enjoy the spoils.
You'll live to 100 and something, so you're all right. Don't worry.
Yeah, 110. I think I might put it up to 120 just to really piss them off.
We've got John Ephraim and Bill Lark on in a couple of weeks.
That'd be great.
And I've been trying to get John for some time, and I didn't know John directly, but I knew people who knew John, and it was quite amazing to connect the points to John. So finally, I got an introduction, and John rang me up, and we talked. And he didn't know me, right, apart from what I did, and the invitation to do a Shooting the Shit episode. And we talked for 40 minutes on the phone, right? And it was just blah 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 blah. You know, what's going on in the industry and that. It was very, very cool.
Very passionate.
And you're right. There's a lot of passionate people in the industry. And the big thing that I say is we don't have a lot of restrictions on how we make our products, and that's our competitive advantage. And so when you hear talk of people saying, well, we need more regulation, we need to control things more, we need to do this and do that, we don't. You know, we need to maximize our advantage, our competitive advantage with what we've got right now. And people are pushing in all directions, whether it's barrels, whether it's barley, whether it's yeast, whether it's maturation, whether it's refills, whatever it is. It's a really cool time to be making spirits. It really is. So, yeah. Well, that's my.
I think anyone who's getting into the industry now, is the first thing they need to do is to make sure they're going to be successful, is to make sure they got themselves a contact with a cooper, someone where they can get their barrels from. Otherwise, they can spend all this money building up a beautiful distillery and then have nothing to put it in. I see that as a problem going forward. Actually, we're knocking back clients every day because we're at our capacity well and truly. So we've closed our books. We're not taking on any more new clients because we just cannot handle any more. And it breaks our heart to do it because we like to help people out, but we just cannot do it. And I'm sure everyone else is in the same boat. If we're in that boat, everyone else is going to be. So, you know, anyone who's looking at getting into the industry, they really need to look at where they're going to get their oat from.
Well, you talk about
that being a problem. Do you see that being a problem in an upcoming problem in the for the whole industry?
We've got to get the coopering industry reinstated so that we can get the apprenticeship system going again, so we can train people. And that's got to happen. And I think with John Carberry coming out with his experience with training, I think he'll be doing a little bit of it. We're looking at doing a bit ourselves through Laurie. And
particularly with the direction of the industry, like, you know, talking about going into larger format casts and stuff like that, where it will, I think, inevitably look a bit more like Scotland, where you're filling, you know, straight into the cask, where you know, when you're recoupering down to 100 litre, you can do that with the machine, and you know, it's not necessarily a skilled job per se, in terms of time learning the skill. Whereas if the industry does get to the point where a lot more fully filled stuff is being done, that's where it's the only way to do it is by the hand tools. So, you know, people have got to start learning how to use the adze, the crumb knife, the crows to get a cask in, check it over, replace staves, you know, fix broken heading. So they're using the tools that have been used for thousands of years since the inception of the trade. So we're looking at going down that line, and that's, you know, we've got Heath down, and we're speaking to other people as well, and we're kind of in its infancy at the minute, but that's more or less our direction, as opposed to expanding our cooperage and trying to employ people and, you know, take over the place. We want to try and put the skills into the hands of more people, and in my mind, I'd like to see a lot of distilleries be able to have their own small setup on site, you know, something that, you know, you can get into affordably, be able to look after your own cask, toast your own cask, have that control in-house where, you know, you've got your eye on everything that's going on. You know what wood's coming, you know what it looks like before it gets shaved. You know what it smells like when it's toasted. You know when you're going to cut that toast. You know roughly the flavor profile you're looking at. You know your char level. You take away that element of surprise, I guess, when at the end of the day, if you pull it out, it's not quite what you asked for or what you were expecting. So
that's experience. It's that exposure. Yeah. No, it's so important. I just want to. We're at 1:30, 1 minute 30, so we tend to wrap up about an hour and a half. But I just want to raise a topic which goes right back to the start. We were talking about wood shortage, and there's a couple of interesting things that are happening in America, which is going to have ramifications, as I see it, and just what I've read and what talking to different people. So, the American white oak forest and the harvesting of the forest, the wood is taking longer to reach maturation for conversion to barrels. So what's happening is there's going to be a shortage of new American white oak, right? Compounding that, well, not compounding, but as a response to that, there's a big push in America to change the legislation that prevents bourbon makers from using refill barrels. As you well know, they all have to go into freshly charred new American white oak barrels, which means that those barrels cannot be used again, which means the majority of the barrels go to Scotland, right? If they change the legislation in America and they start to move into refills for bourbon and that's going to put pressure on the supply line to Scotland and the amount of bourbon barrels that are going to Scotland, which in turn is going to have an impact on what they do as far as their barrel programs, which in turn is going to have an impact on the rest of the world. Are you hearing that? Do you see that as a more of a longer term problem? But do you see that as a problem?
Yeah, we talk about it a little bit in the workshop. You see different reports coming through where they're saying that they're going to start using second fills in the bourbon industry. I see a little bit of resistance to that from the bourbon manufacturers because it's going to change their profile of the flavour that they're looking for. If they're forced into it, they'll be forced into it. They'll have to do it. But I see them resisting it for as long as they possibly can.
Yeah.
I done a little bit of research into it the other day, and I think I read somewhere that in 2020 there was 2.5 million barrels filled with bourbon. So 2.5 million. So that means you're getting rid of 2.5 million as well.
Yeah.
At the moment, at the end of 2020, there was 10 million barrels stored with bourbon in America, and another million with other spirits in it. So there's 11 million barrels floating around over there somewhere. There's a bit of a shortage at the moment. I believe a lot of that's caused by glass shortage or bottle shortage, where they're not able to bottle a lot of their liquid because they can't get the glass. So it's putting a hell of a strain on the barrel supplies.
Yep.
But that's got to turn around at some stage, so that they will free up again. They're saying probably 2023 things should start to free up a little bit.
Yeah.
But also, I've done some numbers on it, like with a bourbon cask, there's roughly 0.1 of a cubic metre of timber goes into a bourbon cask. So cubic metre of timber will make 10 bourbon casks.
Right.
The average oak tree, when you fell it, the recovery, if you got a cubic metre out of an oak tree, you'd be doing really, really well. I don't think you would, but we'll say you do. That's 250,000 trees they've got to cut down this year.
That's a lot.
And there's only about 7% of the oak that's cut in America that actually goes into coopering. The rest of it goes into other manufacturing processes.
Right.
So there's a lot of trees being cut down. So there's got to be a strain on something somewhere along the line. In Europe, France, they tend to manage their forests very well. I think the French oak is bought at auction. I think that might be the case, Laurie. Yeah, so I think so. They control the supply of oak very, very well over there, but they're not using the volumes that they do in America.
Yeah.
But I suppose, in another 5 to 10 years' time, there could be a little bit of an issue coming forward. Therefore, we're going to have to start looking at using more of our wine barrels, I believe.
which goes back to what I was saying right at the start. Yeah. But it also means you're going to see Scottish distilleries, bigger ones, barrel banking on a massive level on the basis that they know this is coming down the pipe in 5 years. So they're going to be just going to be buying up wood and storing it.
Yep.
Which is going
and there's
to...
more and more distilleries appearing. Like how many distilleries in Australia now? And we're only a drop in the ocean. There's probably 250, 300 distilleries in Australia now.
Yep, something like that. Yeah.
And you've got America, all the micro distilleries and so forth over there now, and more distilleries being created in Scotland, in your rum industry in Jamaica and so forth. The spirit industry is growing massively worldwide. So there's even more strain being put on that barrel supply because of the growth of the industry as well. So,
it's quite sobering, actually. It's you do have to think about your wood policy. That's bottom line. What's your wood policy? Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm glad we did that. Luke, Jim did a comment about Crafty. You dropped the bomb. What was the bomb I dropped? I'd love to know.
Jim, the last question, mate.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, don't panic just yet, but just be aware of it.
Yeah. I think it's everyone's a little scared of that.
Yeah. And what the impact is on pricing as well. I mean, there are reports that Scotch is going to triple in price in the next few years. Supply and demand and Japanese market coming online massively and everything else that's going on. It's interesting times, and COVID has definitely changed the landscape. Supply line management, oh my God, we all know about that, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Break from overseas is a nightmare at the moment.
Yeah, no.
With our Australian excess as well, the Australia tax on all of our alcohol products as well, that's going to be terrifyingly huge.
Yeah, look, there has been some relief with the federal government, and they're trying to support the industry, but every 6 months, the excise tax goes up, CPI, and it just keeps creeping up. And that's a worry. All right, guys, I think at 1:37, I think we'll wrap it up, and we need to do the sponsors. So actually, let's hang on, before we do that. Let's talk before we say goodbye. Let's talk to one of our sponsors. So one of our sponsors of Aussie Craft Distillers Shooting the Shit. We're very, very grateful, and we're very pleased to present Laurie and Dave and Cam. So, guys, thank you for your support. In a nutshell, 30 seconds or less, tell us what about you. Sorry, I had to do it. What's the sales pitch? Go.
Just listen to the last hour and a half.
What do you require?
What's your sales pitch?
This is your
big
time
moment
to sell your business.
One of our sponsors. What would you like to say?
We don't want any more. We don't want any more customers.
Go away.
Just go away. Everyone, just go away.
Yeah, that's it.
We're chock-a-block. We'd love to help you all, but we can't.
Which is a brilliant problem to have.
Yeah. That's
all right. So don't bother. Don't bother, fellas.
Don't bother Transwood.
Yep, they don't want to hear
Refusal
from you.
may offend.
Feel free to send them booze, but you're unlikely to get a barrel from them. Instead, maybe try Andrew Young from Lion Cooperage, who is, of course,
he'll tell you to piss off as well.
Brilliant. All right, so ignore our two barrel sponsors. Have a chat to the barrel brokers. Robbie might have something for you.
He's got plenty.
You'll ring Robbie up and he'll go, "What do you want?"
And you
Anyway.
probably can't talk to Burns either because I know they're fully booked.
Yeah, no, if you want to steal, don't talk to Burnsy because there'll be a
Don't talk to
no,
Burnsy, yeah.
can't help you. Come and talk to 2023.
I think Colmart down here's got about 2 years' work ahead of him as well.
Oh, God.
Jesus. All right. So, which of our sponsors can you talk to? I mean, look, Wild Bloke, and we haven't run out of water yet. So
No,
I think
Adrian's good. He can supply you water.
He can supply you water. Great.
More of it's falling out of the sky as we speak. So
Yeah, I can hear it. We've got Saber Glass. I don't think we've got a shortage of glass at the moment, do
Oh,
we?
no. You've got to get your orders in and hope like hell they turn up on time.
Yeah, the
Those sea containers.
global supply chains kick in there.
Yeah, good. All right.
Who else we got? CCL.
All right. We got CCL. Can they?
Yeah, no, they struggle with getting label stock material internationally.
man.
So-
So as always, we're doing a good homage to our
All
suppliers.
So, thanks for your support, everyone.
Yeah,
yeah,
just don't.
Pam just come up with our sales pitch. She said, "Don't call us, we'll call you."
Perfect.
And we're going to finish the night off on a nice TIB from Timmy Ducker.
Oh, nice.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, in 2 weeks' time, we have Callington Mill, John Ibrahim. So that's booked in for the 3rd of, well, according to the calendar that Crafty controls. That's on the.
So who knows when we're speaking to John then?
Yeah, look, I think it's on the 3rd of March. So
and he sent a reminder to John. So
you did, or I did? I didn't.
I didn't.
Shit. And then
Yeah, please.
2 weeks later, we've got Still Magic, Marcel Thompson.
Yeah, which is all about setting up a distillery and the good, the bad, the ugly. And it's going to be very, very interesting. And we're actually, we're booked out pretty much for the whole year. We got sessions lined up every second Thursday, and we're squeezing in a couple more. And we're also going to have guest presenters. So 2 weeks ago, Luke bailed out. He couldn't do it. And John Jarvis stepped in, which was cool.
He did.
Luke bailed out, folled by Crafty.
I bailed out as
Crafty
well.
fell out.
Yeah.
So
John and I ran it solo. And
I
discussion
pre-organised my absence.
Anyway, so all right.
So yeah, we've got some good stuff coming up, certainly, and yeah, as Crafty said, we're booked up all the way to the end of the year. So
don't talk to us, we'll talk to you.
Don't call us, we'll call you. Yep, perfect.
That's ours. You leave it alone.
Damn it, trademark.
I'll take your patent.
Get a trademark out on that one.
There's a patent on that.
Oh, keep going.
Please, please like and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube. It does help us out. Please share with anybody who you think will bother listening to us. And yeah, thank you very much for listening. And yeah, have a good evening.
And Dave Laurie, mate, that was awesome. A lot of learnings there. Appreciate it. I learned a lot, and a lot of people out there would have learned. And it'll get pushed out.
That was fantastic.
Yeah, that really was. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah,
Much
really
appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed yourself.
All right, I am hitting end now. Oh,